My work was founded on a long and growing love and understanding of the North, of being permeated with its spirit. It has to be seen, lived with, and painted with complete devotion to its own life and spirit before it yields its secrets. My challenge at the moment, however, is to prepare a meal of pork and beans. Is this your first trip north? To Algoma? Oh, it's a rugged wild land, packed with an amazing variety of subjects. A veritable paradise for the creative adventurer. It's got, I'll go on the subject if you'll let me. Now, my first trip to Algoma was May of 1918. There was just my good friend, James McCallum, and myself on that one. And it was, without embellishment needed, a very good trip. Now, McCallum and I had originally planned to spend our time east of here on Manitoulin Island. But when we got there, it wasn't suitable. No, perhaps because of my state of mind. My brother had died, killed in the Great War, and I couldn't get things straightened out up here. I was a victim of moods. It was as if I had built everything I strove for on sand. So we pushed on, taking a boat across the North Channel and catching the westbound train, the Canadian Pacific, up to Sault Ste. Marie. I like to call it the Sioux. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think I've introduced myself. The name's Lauren Harris. My brother's name was Howard. Howard was a decorated soldier. He survived the trenches of the Somme, the gray, muddy hell of Passchendaele. But he never made it home. That was a devastating blow on top of everything else. That brave fellow was my only sibling. And I think it matters enough to mention, our father had died many years before, when we were just boys. So, yes, I was very grateful when Dr. McCallum decided to get me out of myself, you could say, and up to Northern Ontario that spring of 18. The ample, replenishing North. Now, we spent one night in the Sioux, and then bright and early next morning boarded the ACR, the Algoma Central Railway. We traveled nearly 130 miles north to a lumber camp. In railroad talk, we went to mile 129. But for me, it was climbing into paradise. Here, it became possible to forget entirely to give my health or state of mind even a passing thought. No man is profound enough to explain fully the nature of his own inspiration. He generally attributes it to 1,001 extraneous things. But inspiration, if it is to amount to anything more than a pleasant experience, that is, if it is to be put to real use for the benefit of human beings, and, well, that certainly is its purpose, must come at the highest moments in the momentum of work. Well, all created objects from a hammer to a symphony are the result of inner momentum, the workings of the heart and mind. Now that is what I felt. I felt the strange, brooding, lonely presence of Mother Nature, fostering a new race, a new age, and as part of it, a new expression in art. It was an unfolding of the heart itself. Yeah, I spent that entire summer thinking and planning a properly organized sketching expedition. I was particularly anxious to speak with Jim MacDonald about what McCallum and myself had experienced. Jim, known to history as J.E.H. MacDonald, was my first sketching partner. We met in 1911 at an exhibition of his works. I was more affected by his sketches than by any paintings I had seen in Europe. I liked Jim as an artist and as a human being. Oh, he was 12 years older and full of humor and patience. I am amongst the many friends who have been touched by his wonderful poetic soul. I wanted to share this place with him. Well, James, me boy, we have a car waiting us on the Algoma Central. A car to live in, eat in, and work out of. Oh, they'll move us about as we desire. Now, your only real essentials, as I see it now, are blankets, lots of them, warm clothes, and a sketching outfit. Oh, I might also suggest a rig that will enable you to keep dry and sketch in the rain. Now, we leave Toronto the evening, Tuesday the 10th or Wednesday the 11th of September, arrive Sioux next day. Of course, none of us could know Algoma was to become known as MacDonald's country. Now, some things work out for the good. Poor MacDonald was going through a rough time. He was recovering from a stroke and had money problems. And the situation was made all the more difficult for him when he was forced to move his family into the studio building where we painted. Now, that's not easy on a man's ego. Still, for most of the boys, it was like that. Not a dime to be had in the true arts. So they spent their days in commercial work, designing product labels, that sort of thing. Oh, not that I don't admire honorable work of all kinds. I know I was born into the fortunate percentage, thanks to my grandfather, Alanson Harris, and my father, too. But I deplored our neglect of the artist in Canada. As a young, vigorous people, we should have been bringing the pioneering spirit, the spirit of adventure into our cultivation of the arts. A country that ignores the arts leaves no record of itself worth preserving. Now, I had spent some time in Europe in my youth, and, well, like any artist, I studied the collections in the museums and the galleries. But, well, this was not my art, my history. The European artist is influenced by the existing works as much as by nature or mankind. But in Canada, we had no great masters to study, no history of great works to draw from. We needed to create our own new forms of inspiration. What we were seeking was the varied moods, the character, the spirit of our country. Imagine yourself being driven to create, to risk all security for your family and yourself as an artist. And the voices of your own country are demanding this from you. Canada is essentially an agricultural country, and any picture distinctively Canadian must include the painting of animals. Oh, yes, yes. Or how about this one? Canada is notable for handsome women as well as cows. Oh, it was infuriating and somewhat invigorating, as I've never shied away from a good battle of the egos. You know, Dr. McCallum and I were allies on that front. The front being the fight to keep the visionary Canadian artist working here in his own country. My God, McCallum would grumble. If all you young fellas go off to the States, art in Canada's never gonna get anywhere. McCallum couldn't paint. He was an eye doctor, but he was a patron of arts in all ways. He always had one artist or another, well, sometimes their families as well, coming and going from his cottage at Go Home Bay, which is quite the name for a place where nobody ever seemed to be asked to leave. Now, he sponsored Jackson and Thompson, giving them 1 year's wages to quit their day jobs and paint full-time. And he held 3/13 shares in my studio building. You know, all around, it was a great group of friends to share this with. McCallum, MacDonald, Jackson, Lismer, Carmichael, Johnson, more to remember. We called ourselves the Group of Seven. By September of 18, we're back in Algoma. It's a spectacular arrangement. The ACR management has come through with everything I've asked and paid for. And there are 4 of us, so we're a proper expedition. McCallum's along as chief cook and bottle washer. MacDonald is looking frail and can't hide his concern about holding us back. And the artist Frank Johnson, well, not yet a personal friend, but a very good artist, rounds out the 4. I suppose I'm not the kindest to Frank Johnson. Apparently, I've been overheard, referring to him as the anemic, doddering Frank. But he has this dandy's way of dressing that makes me wince. The Van Dyke, velvet smoking jackets, flowing ties. Oh, well, truth be told, it was Frank who told McCallum and myself about the railroad line into the wilderness. He rode the line back in '15. He's a fine outdoorsman, and his son is named Lauren, with a W, in my honor. ACR Boxcar 10557. She'd spent her youth as a rolling office for a railroad work gang. My request was that they bring her out of retirement and refit her as a rolling studio and living quarters. Well, it won't be long before we put our mark on her, and she on us, with memories that are the sweetest. Well, she's hitched up, hauled out to Agawa Canyon, where we're unhitched and left to our own devices. Canyon Station, mile 113. First day in the canyon was a warm September morning. McCallum and I are experimenting as to how 2 of us, well, 2 men in general, can sit on the peed, a handcar, and work the handle and pedals. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Well, you put your foot there, I'll put my other one there. It's a handcar meant for one fella, not 2 lively fellows like us. But Before long, we're winging our way down the track, eyes on the lookout for the perfect composition of water, tree, and rock. MacDonald stays close to home and writes a letter to his wife, Joan. Dear Joan, Frank has just gone singing down the railway track in the tail end of a procession comprising the doctor and Lauren, led by Woofy. Woofy. Woofy was my dog, a wolfhound. Jim writes quite a bit about old Woofy. That poor old blue blood communing with the wild wolves. Well, before getting back to describing life in the canyon. Well, as I began to say, the folks have departed, leaving the canyon to Itchy Manitou and me. They're headed for a chain of idyllic waterfalls 3 or 4 miles off, and as I don't feel like taking that walk, I am keeping house alone. I expect to go down there this afternoon when our neighbor at the section house, old Sam Corbeil, French-Canadian railwayman and trapper, is going to take me on his jigger. I have not quite assimilated this experience yet. It is something to be quiet about and think over. You know, I can't remember what Johnson was singing down the track that day, one of the first days in. It was probably a show tune. Frank took his art training in the United States, lived in New York for a while, and he has a penchant for the theater. Part of that flamboyant character of his. Now, he has decided that he is dippy about the country. And I'm in agreement with that. We are a decidedly dippy bunch. You know, there's so much natural perfection surrounding us that we come up with a code word to simplify things. Linto, one of us will say, and everyone knows it means look to the left, look to the right, for yet another breathtaking view. Nothing in a work of art should be emotionally neutral. This way of life, of waking up in the canyon surrounded by the powerful, awe-inspiring Mother Nature, keeps us in a constant state of heightened emotion. Well, if you have ever spent a night in the wilderness, you will know that everything in one shifts somehow. I think this time spent sleeping and waking in the canyon borders on the mythical. Jim writes to Joan. Ugh. Last night, when the train went through just at dusk, with the firemen stoking up, the light of the fire stirring upon the smoke clouds, it was easy to imagine His Satanic Majesty taking a drive through his domain. I had walked a little distance up the canyon, and the effect was eerie enough to make me speed up for home. The great perpendicular rocks seemed to hang as though they may fall at any minute, and the dark Agawa, moving quietly through it all, had an uncanny snakiness. I'm sure that put Joan's mind at ease. But yesterday was a dull and rainy day. On a fine day such as this, the canyon seems to lead upwards and has all the attributes of an imagined paradise. There are beautiful waterfalls on all sides, and the finest trees, spruce, elm, and pine. It is a Shelley-like kind of place. At first, we're caught by the attraction of the North to copy nature. There's a long devotion to her outward aspects until we're thoroughly acquainted with her facts of form and growth, an understanding of her streams, rivers, lakes, a knowledge of her rhythms, an assimilation of her moods, her many, many moods. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover I had not lived. I wanted to live deep and suck all the marrow from life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. And if it proved to be mean, why then get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world. Or if it were sublime, to know it by example and be able to give a true account of it. At night, we read passages from writers who inspire us. Now, those are the words of Henry David Thoreau. And like Thoreau, we went to the woods. Hubert, September 24. Have got 26 sketches up to now, and Frank and Lauren more than that. The weather is first rate, quite warm and summery, with the black flies busy on my brow. Frost this morning, and a fresh breeze from the further north coming down the lake. We work from early morning until dark, in sun, gray weather, and rain. We sketch on birchboard panels using oil and brush. Now, the sketches are the photographs of what we see filtered through our own perspectives. We'll take them back to our studios and work up full paintings sometime over the winter. Other times, not until years have passed. There's a good story about a number of Jim's sketches, some captured during our time in Algoma. This was 1931. I remember exactly because Jim had suffered another stroke. The market for our field sketches wasn't worth anything, not then, not yet. On doctor's orders, Jim and Joan were going to be living in Barbados for the good of Jim's health, everyone hoped. But that wasn't to be. And the doctor was discouraging his talk of ever returning to work. So Jim and his son picked 10 of their favorite sketches, wrapped them in cellophane and tar paper, put them in boxes, and buried them in the backyard. And that is where they stayed for 40 years. Those sketches are now hanging in the Vancouver Art Gallery, and everybody who considers himself a critic or an expert has something to say about them. And I was the one who told Thoreau, Jim's son, to take the lot and burn them at the wood stove because nobody wanted them. These are good stories for you to have. The boys just painted and painted as quickly, as naturally as they could, and you are left with the memories of our experiences interpreted in the art. A painting of mine was stored in the back of a hospital broom closet at the Toronto Western for years. It was one I titled Algoma Hill. It sold at auction in 2005, 35 years after my death, for $1.2 million. As we have this place all to ourselves, Frank and Lauren are having a great time yelling anything that comes into their head. Frank is singing and in between imitating crows and giving wolf howls. We seem to be the only people on earth at this minute. Yours in haste, Jay. When I was born, I didn't breathe for minutes afterwards. The doctor turned his attention to my mother, assuming I was stillborn. But my beloved little auntie kept at me, though, until voila, I took a breath, and then another, and then began to cry. To the artist, his art is an adventure in which he seeks to regain unity with nature and the knowledge of his own immortal being. I was a sickly child, and my parents must surely have been concerned about my intellectual development because I was, well, as I remember it, weak and short of breath, confined to the house for long stretches of time. Now, they gave me the tools to draw and paint, which led to writing and illustrating my own stories and doodling everything in sight. I had plenty of time and became very good at the planning and execution of elaborate pranks. I was labeled high-spirited. Howard, in contrast, had to be the responsible one. We were very close, born 14 months apart, two boys who liked to make each other laugh. I was never asked to give up dreaming or aspiring to a life of spiritual introspection. I came away from my childhood with my imagination intact. My work was founded on a long and growing love and understanding of the North, of being permeated with its spirit. I think in the end, it actually added up to something of consequence.